She was an attractive single mom looking for Mr. Right.
She wanted to be in a real relationship just like any other human being.
He promised to fulfill her every fantasy.
He talked about doing things in the bedroom that simply cannot be repeated, but that's what appealed to her.
But just as their passions reached stratospheric heights, tragedy struck.
She said, Mommy's dead. Something happened to Mama.
There was blood all over the bed. There was blood spatter on the wall.
The ensuing investigation would expose a closet full of dirty laundry and a secret so incendiary, some wondered if this murder was justified.
Past week, I've been a dead man walking. How could she possibly do this to somebody?
The whole country ended up chiming in. Everybody was divided.
It was so heartbreaking to hear national radio personalities say, I would have done the same thing too.
Why me? Why me?
She should have told him from the beginning. I think the driving force in his action was revenge.
September 6, 2012. It's a warm fall afternoon in the historic Dallas neighborhood of Oak Cliff. Two young siblings are walking home from school, but they have no idea the horror that's waiting for them.
They came home from school just like they did every day. They walk through the door and they're calling their mother.
Mom, where are you?
And she doesn't answer.
Opening the bedroom door, they are greeted by a horrifying sight.
When the children saw their mother lying down, they walk over to her and they noticed that there was blood on her neck.
They immediately started screaming and crying, so they ran to the neighbor's house.
Moments later, Dallas emergency dispatchers receive a call.
Dallas 323. Come back here, something is wrong. What is wrong? Ma'am, I just know my neighbor kids just came home and found their mother on the floor laying down in a pool of blood.
First responders rush into the bedroom, but sadly, it's much too late. The woman, 28-year-old Cecily Bolden, is already dead. It's clear to EMTs this is no accident.
181. We have a stabbing. DOA. Start homicide unit, please.
Cecily Bolden died from 2 stab wounds to the neck. There was 1 stab wound that severed her carotid artery.
She sat there and actually drowned in her own blood.
As news of the tragedy rips through the apartment complex, it seems impossible to believe that someone would want to brutally murder this beautiful young mother of 2.
I just didn't know what to think at the time. I was upset, I was frustrated.
But as the investigation into Cecily's death unfolds, it becomes clear that she harbored a deep secret, one that may have cost her her life. Born in 1984 and raised by 2 hardworking parents, Cecily Bolden demonstrated a fiercely independent streak from an early age.
Cecily was very much headstrong, firecracker, stood on her own ground, did what she wanted to do. She was very much so interested in living life her way.
After high school, Cecily became a certified nursing assistant in Dallas. But friends and family said her true passion lay elsewhere.
She really wanted to be a hairdresser, because that's all she ever did was hair, braiding.
She was always braiding hair for her friends and her friends' kids. She ultimately wanted to open her own beauty salon.
But Cecily's dream took a backseat to reality when at 19, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Bethany. While her relationship with Bethany's father didn't last, Cecily soon found someone to take his place, a charismatic Dallas DJ named Jeff Busby.
In the city, they know him as DJ Frost.
Yeah, we started out being really flirty with each other. It took off from there. We started dating and hanging out a lot.
Despite an 11-year age difference, 22-year-old Cecily and 33-year-old Jeff wasted no time moving in together. It wasn't long before the couple welcomed another child into the world, son Gerald. It was in motherhood that Cecily found her true calling.
She was very devoted to her children and making sure that her children had the best life that she could possibly offer them.
Cecily's driving force was her children, period. And she loved kids and kids loved her.
But after 2 years together, Cecily and Jeff realized their relationship wasn't built for the long haul.
We just didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. We just chose to go in different directions, but we stayed cool with each other.
For a woman blessed with a fiery personality and a knockout body, Cecily had no trouble hopping back into the Dallas dating scene.
It's hot, she was all that. My sister was thick. You know, she had the booty, you know, everything that guys like.
Cecily might have had her pick of potential boyfriends, but over the next few years, she kissed her fair share of frogs. By the time she turned 28, Cecily still hadn't found her Prince Charming.
Cecily did go through a rough patch. We live in the real world. And no, her choices always weren't the best.
A couple of the guys she dated were a little questionable. I wasn't too fond of course, and didn't want around the kids.
Worst of all, some of Cecily's boyfriends were allegedly violent with her.
There were several domestic violence cases against her ex-boyfriends.
She had been abused in the past, so she definitely had some things to be concerned about.
But through it all, Cecily never gave up hope on finding true love.
She was really looking for someone to love her and to offer her probably what she envisioned as, you know, the very best relationship that she could have.
Those dreams seemed to finally come true in August of 2012, when Cecily met 36-year-old Larry Dunn in an online chat room.
It was pretty innocent. You know, they started flirting, and then one thing kind of led to another.
I think that she just was seeking love and attention, and he was willing to shower her with that.
A charismatic and successful furniture mover in Dallas, it didn't take long for Larry to sweep Cecily off her feet.
There was definitely an attraction there, and it wasn't long before things moved from the virtual world to the real world.
Unlike some of the other men Cecily had recently dated, Larry treated her and her kids with warmth and tenderness.
She felt that he loved her, that he wanted to help her take care of the children, that he really wanted to be in a committed relationship with her.
Though they had only known each other for a few weeks, their physical chemistry was undeniable.
Their relationship turned sexual just like that. It was hot, it was sexy, it was intense, and they fulfilled each other's every desire.
But just when it seemed their love for one another had never burned brighter, tragedy struck. As investigators arrive at Cecily's apartment, their first objective is to secure the crime scene. Second, they are faced with the terrible task of speaking with Cecily's children about their gruesome discovery.
Aside from losing their mother and the tragedy of that, they walked in and saw their mother lying dead in a pool of blood. I mean, that's horribly traumatic for a child.
But the burning question on everyone's mind is who could have murdered this mother of two in cold blood? "28-year-old single mother Cecily Bolden dreamed of being in a committed, loving relationship. After years of heartache and disappointment, her love life took an uplifting turn when she met 36-year-old furniture mover Larry Dunn.
Larry appeared to embody everything that Cecily was looking for: love, devotion, companionship.
But Cecily and Larry's love connection was severed on September 6, 2012, when she was found stabbed to death inside her Dallas apartment.
Was this a robbery? Could this have been someone she knew? Who could have done this to her?
And while there's no sign of the murder weapon, the cause of death is clear.
What led to Cecily Bolden's death was a stab wound to the carotid artery, and she pretty much just bled out.
There was a lot of blood on the bed. There was some blood spatter on the wall. It was a fatal blow right away, basically.
As investigators continue processing the gruesome scene, news of Cecily's death reaches friends and family.
I got the phone call from the kids, and they were hysterical. They were crying and screaming, And I asked what's going on, and she told me Mommy's dead. Something happened to Mama.
My little cousin told me that someone had killed your sister, and I'm like, what? I'm like, Dad, don't come over here playing like that. You know, he's like, nah, man, I'm for real, your sister dead.
Grieving friends and family, along with Cecily's 2 children, gather outside her apartment. Everyone, including police, is desperate for answers. But at this point, investigators can only speculate as to a possible motive.
I didn't know what to think. Maybe somebody broke in, somebody done jumped on her.
Interviewing neighbors, it's a theory that quickly gains traction.
Someone had broken into her house 2 days prior to the murder. So the speculation was whomever broke into the house had returned to finish the job.
Was it possible the same individual had violently attacked Cecily in some sort of robbery gone wrong? Speaking to neighbors, investigators discover that Cecily had a reputation in the community for keeping cash inside her apartment, which gives the deadly robbery theory even more traction.
Cecily sold candy and snacks from her apartment just to raise a little extra money. She may have had large sums of money at her apartment.
Everyone knew that Cecily Bolden was the candy lady of the neighborhood. That's a potential motive.
People is struggling out here. And in this city, your door will get kicked down if they feel like you making money like that.
But as detectives scour the scene, they soon realize there's a problem with the robbery theory.
There was no broken windows, the door wasn't kicked in.
Nothing stolen, not a dime took. Had every penny that was in her candy jar, had every dollar. Nah, it wasn't no robbery.
But if robbery isn't the motive, then investigators are presented with an even more chilling possibility that Cecily knew her attacker.
It seemed like she knew her attacker because the way she was found. Nothing with a t-shirt on. It's like she was prepared for someone.
Half naked, on the floor, no forced entry. But yeah, she knew whoever was in there. Real good.
Working from the assumption that Cecily knew her attacker, police dig into her personal records for clues.
Police started looking into her cell phone, text messages, and they came across the name Larry Dunn.
Police track down Larry and ask him to come to the station for an interview.
Like I told you over the phone and in person, there's been an incident, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, okay? But
what is this?
It's then that investigators break the news about Cecily's murder.
She was found dead in her apartment, and we're working out.
Oh, God.
You know, we're treating it as a murder right now.
Oh, God.
He was definitely upset by the news.
And while Larry freely admits he and Cecily's romance was red hot, he claims their passion never boiled over into physical violence.
And y'all have never gotten into any kind of arguments or fights or?
No, I mean, argument and fight for what?
Larry is adamant that he's innocent of any crime and insists that he was nowhere near Cecily's house at the time of the murder. Detectives are still suspicious. They run a background check on Larry, but find nothing that indicates he is capable of physical violence.
He'd been arrested for a few minor misdemeanors, nothing serious, and especially nothing violent.
It takes a really cold-hearted individual to stab to death a mother of 2 children. It just didn't seem like somebody that would just go out and murder a person.
In addition, the physical evidence doesn't seem to tie Larry to the scene in any way.
There were a lot of pictures taken of Larry Dunn. He didn't have any cuts on his hands, anything like that.
Larry is tentatively cleared of any wrongdoing. Still searching for Cecily's killer, investigators turn to a friend of Cecily's named LaToya Arnett.
They found LaToya Arnett, the person who made the 911 call, and they brought her down to the station to give a statement.
It's a move that quickly pays dividends. LaToya tells police that approximately 3 hours before Cecily's body was discovered, she saw an unknown man enter Cecily's apartment.
It was a male, black male I never seen before.
Describe him to me.
He was probably about
Black
5.
man?
Black man. He was probably about 5'6".
Whether the man knew Cecily was unclear to LaToya, but she claims he obviously felt comfortable enough to enter the apartment unannounced.
He just walked in. He twisted the doorknob and walked in. And I felt like that was kind of strange.
Detectives can't help but wonder if this mystery man might have been Cecily's boyfriend, Larry Dunn.
You ever heard the name Larry?
My cousin told me, Cecily said that she started talking to somebody named Larry.
Okay. But you've never met him?
I never met him.
Was it Larry Dunn that LaToya Arnett saw entering Cecily's apartment the morning of the murder? Detectives create a photo lineup to see if LaToya recognizes Larry as the mystery man.
Is this the person you saw walk into Cecily's apartment today? Oh, no, I am.
With LaToya unable to identify Larry Dunn as the mystery man, detectives move on to another potential suspect, Cecily's ex-boyfriend, Jeff Busby.
They had a long history. They had a roller coaster relationship. Could he have been jealous? Could he have acted in a fit of rage? It's possible.
Possible, but according to investigators, not likely.
Jeff Busby's alibi checked out. Jeff and Cecily were on good terms. It became pretty clear to police investigators. Jeff Busby did not commit this crime.
We remained close. That was one of my best friends.
But digging further into Cecily's romantic background, investigators discover that in between dating Jeff Busby and Larry Dunn, Cecily was involved with several other men. And more than one of these relationships raises serious red flags.
She filed domestic violence charges for violence against herself and her children.
For detectives, it's a stunning turn of events. Could one of these former flames have found out about Cecily and Larry's red-hot romance and flew into a jealous rage? As police begin peeling back the layers of Cecily's life, they have no idea the skeletons they are about to uncover. It's been 6 hours since 28-year-old Dallas resident Cecily Bolden was found stabbed to death inside her apartment. After dismissing robbery as a motive, investigators shifted their focus to Cecily's new love interest, 36-year-old Larry Dunn. But with no evidence connecting Larry to the crime, investigators are at a loss. And with cops still on the lookout for a mystery man seen entering Cecily's apartment shortly before her death, time is of the essence.
And we need to find out who this person is.
Desperate for a lead, investigators decide to shine a spotlight on Cecily's roller coaster love life.
Detectives ran a background check on Cecily and learned that there were several domestic violence cases against her ex-boyfriends.
I don't know if it was that the pickings were slim, but Cecily sometimes didn't make the very best choices in men.
When detectives start investigating the former men in Cecily's life, they uncover a slew of potential suspects.
Police investigators looked at Cecily's ex-boyfriends, several of whom had a violent history with her.
But one of Cecily's violent ex-boyfriends stands out above the rest.
He was fighting on her. He used to hit her. That's just the kind of guy he was. He would fight on women all the time.
The man's name is Rex, and apparently, Rex's rage wasn't reserved solely for Cecily. Her friends recount an incident that took place in 2006, involving her beloved 2-year-old son, Gerald.
Her boyfriend was watching him one day while she was at work, and we got a call from the hospital. The doctor said that he'd been punched and kicked.
When Cecily saw what happened, she was devastated. She was really devastated.
Cecily never forgave Rex for hurting her son and soon ended their relationship. In light of their volatile history, police can't help but wonder if Rex might have dropped by Cecily's apartment unannounced, which in turn triggered a violent confrontation.
Nothing sets a mother off quicker than someone trying to abuse her child. So if one of her exes did show up, Cecily may have become enraged.
But no sooner do investigators think they have a promising new lead than they hit a brick wall. Pulling the ex-couple's case file, they learn Rex is currently serving time on charges related to the child abuse incident against Cecily's son.
He ended up finally getting caught and he got sentenced to like 20 years, 20 to 25 years.
It's a disappointing setback. But Rex is not the only ex-boyfriend whose violent past raises eyebrows. Detectives come across another man from Cecily's past, Michael Walker, a man who was even more despised by Cecily's family than Rex.
If he ain't in jail, he need to be in jail. Praise God for him that I haven't seen him. Little leprechaun-looking mother.
What you mean I need to back up?
You're not coming in here. You need to back up.
I damn near take care of all the bills in this house. What you mean I need to back up?
You don't take care of nothing.
What you mean?
No, you are not coming in here. No. You need to leave.
That he had been abusive toward her in the past. He had broken her car window.
Cecily's family claims the abuse escalated after she broke up with Michael in early 2011, just months before her murder.
Bye. Cecily, what?
He was mad, he harassed and threatened her, he kicked her vehicle, and he told her, "You better invest in some protection."
Had Michael Walker followed through on his threat and killed Cecily in a jealous rage?
Sometimes people can't accept when an ex has moved on. The jealousy of a former lover can take someone who is otherwise perfectly rational and make them snap.
Police put out an APB on Michael Walker, then once again turned to the one person who might help them tie Michael to the scene once and for all: Cecily's neighbor, LaToya Arnett.
She told police she saw a man walking into Cecily's apartment the day of the murder.
Could Michael Walker be the mystery intruder LaToya saw on that fateful day? Or is there another, even more dangerous man in Cecily's life? One who wouldn't stop until Cecily was dead. After enduring years of abusive relationships, Cecily Bolden finally felt she turned a corner when she met Larry Dunn online. For the single mother of two, Larry represented a chance at true happiness. But after Cecily's discovered dead in her own apartment, police find themselves staring at a rogues gallery of volatile ex-boyfriends, any one of whom could have killed Cecily.
A couple of the guys she dated were a little questionable, but I mean, I was questionable too, so I can't, pass judgment on nobody.
But after learning about a series of disturbing events that took place the year before, police have their sights set on one man, an old flame of Cecily's named Michael Walker.
Michael had allegedly threatened Cecily Bolden by leaving harassing messages and allegedly threatening her life. So he was a prime suspect.
But with Michael Walker's whereabouts unknown, detectives have no choice but to turn to their next best option, Cecily's neighbor, LaToya Arnett. In her initial statement, LaToya claimed to have witnessed an unknown black male entering Cecily's apartment just a few hours before the murder. If their hunch is correct, the man LaToya saw that day was Michael Walker.
Have you ever heard Celia talk about an ex-boyfriend?
Michael?
Yes.
It wasn't him. I know how he looked.
Without a doubt, it was not him.
Not Michael.
But if the man LaToya saw that day wasn't Michael Walker, then who was it? The only other person of interest that even remotely fits LaToya's description is Larry Dunn. But after their initial interview with Larry, detectives all but ruled him out as a suspect. With no other leads, detectives circle back to Larry Dunn, if only to make doubly sure of his innocence. However, when they arrive at Larry's residence, they make a startling discovery.
Yes, is Larry here?
Larry Dunn was a married man. He had 2 kids.
Here to talk to you about Cecily Bolden.
Who is Cecily?
The fact that Larry Dunn was married at the time adds a whole new layer of complication to this case. It could have been that Larry's wife, catching wind of the affair, decided herself to go after Cecily.
But judging from her reaction, Larry's wife had no idea her husband was carrying on an affair with Cecily Bolden.
Now, did you know her, ma'am? Do you even know who we're talking about? Or
I
is
have
this...
no idea. This is the first time I'm hearing about this.
Ooh.
I've been at home raising kids.
She was absolutely shocked. It was clear she had no idea. So if she had no idea, she had no reason to murder Cecily.
Why don't we go down to the office and talk about it if you have no problems with it?
Look, if it helps, I'll go.
His wife might not have had a motive to murder Cecily, But that doesn't get Larry off the hook for possible murder. Back at the station, Larry quickly confesses to one thing. This wasn't the first time he'd cheated on his wife.
It was pretty common for Larry to cheat on his wife. Larry would meet women on chat lines and they would exchange phone numbers.
You got 5, 6, 7 women that you dealing with.
It seems Cecily wasn't the love of Larry's life so much as his latest sexual conquest.
He wasn't looking for a relationship. He wasn't looking to leave his wife. He just wanted to have extramarital sex. So she thought she was hooking up with somebody that was single. She had no idea he was married. He never told her.
Me and Cecily, I was fucking around on my wife.
So y'all been having sex for 2 weeks, 3 weeks? What?
We had sex like 3 times.
While Larry comes clean about his infidelity, he maintains he had nothing to do with Cecily's murder. Though Larry does admit that he did have sex with Cecily the morning of the crime.
I called her like, look, I want to come through, I want some. She's like, come on, I went over there.
He said he went there, they had sex, and he left. When he left, she was fine. She said bye, he said bye, and he left.
Larry is so adamant about his innocence, he volunteers to let investigators search his car. But when CSIs examine Larry's vehicle, they make a surprising discovery.
Luminol is a substance where you can spray it on blood and it will illuminate. So that's what they sprayed in the car. And so at that point, they saw that there was quite a bit of blood in there.
Larry's story changed from, I just had sex with her, I don't know anything about a murder, to she killed me, so I killed her.
But what does Larry mean by that cryptic comment? Detectives can hardly believe what Larry says next.
He said that he had killed her because he was in a rage over finding out that she was HIV positive.
He was pretty adamant that he was the victim in this case. There were multiple things going on in his mind, and he blamed her for all of that.
According to Larry, Cecily had failed to disclose that she was HIV positive prior to having sex with him the first time.
For the past week, I've been a dead man walking, and all I could think about was her. And why and how could she possibly do this to somebody?
Right.
Like, why? Why me? You know, why me? And I was hurt, and my mind was going 1,000,000 miles a second all day since she told me. Every day since she told me.
Adding to Larry's anger was the health risk Cecily's HIV posed for his wife.
Having HIV would have been devastating for him because at that point he's possibly passed it along to his wife.
It seemed as if Larry Dunn had lost it all. He had potentially lost his family. He was potentially going to die from HIV.
I think within the African American community, there is still some stigma surrounding a person being HIV positive. Along with stigma comes isolation, fear, and views of hatred.
Certain he was carrying the HIV virus, Larry thought he might as well enjoy his time with Cecily while he could.
We had already had sex like 4 times.
So you didn't think one more was gonna matter?
Why would it? 4 times. Unprotected with a chick with HIV.
According to Larry, it was after this 4th and final sexual encounter that his anger at Cecily turned to rage.
He said that she began talking about having HIV and she was acting like it wasn't a big deal. He says that just sent him into a rage.
I just lost it, man.
And what did you do?
I went in the kitchen and I got a steak knife.
Did she see the knife in your hand?
No, she didn't see it until it was in her throat.
He wanted her to feel pain, so he stabbed her in her throat and chest area.
The manner of the attack was very brutal. The one who actually killed her is the one that was in her carotid artery.
Larry washed up before he left. He also burned his clothes and he threw the knife in the dumpster.
Based on Larry's confession, detectives are able to locate the murder weapon. They also charge Larry with the murder of Cecily Bolden. But even with Larry in custody, plenty of questions still remain. not the least of which is whether Larry's actions constituted self-defense.
If she had HIV and she didn't tell him until after the fact, was he justified? After all, this is Texas. And in the court of law, when it comes to defending yourself, anything is possible.
When 28-year-old Cecily Bolden began a heated relationship with Larry Dunn, she thought she'd finally met the man of her dreams. But after a few short weeks, that dream turned into a nightmare when Cecily's children discovered her body in the bedroom of their apartment. After investigating a virtual laundry list of potential suspects, detectives ultimately discovered that not only was Cecily's new boyfriend behind the crime, he was also a married man.
Well, I don't think that she had any idea that he was married.
He had led this double life. He was sleeping around on his wife and successfully doing so for a while.
But perhaps the most shocking aspect of the case was Larry's alleged motive for murdering Cecily.
She knew that she was HIV positive, but she did not initially tell him. I think he felt disrespected and hurt by that. And so it just triggered something in his mind, and he decided that he was going to kill her.
And things only got worse when Cecily allegedly made light of the situation, which pushed Larry over the edge.
It's not that bad.
So you just gonna give me HIV, endanger my life, and pretend like it's okay?
Larry Dunn trusted Cecily Bolden. He had been intimate with her. So perhaps he was feeling betrayed or confused, could not get past what he believed she had done to him.
But as the tawdry details of the case go viral, a surprising number of people come out in support of Larry's actions.
The whole country ended up chiming in on it. A lot of people were like, I would have did the same thing. And then you had the other side of the country, and they're like, you know, nobody should have to die.
It initially was portrayed more as he'd found out that she had HIV and he killed her right then. That's a different scenario than what we had. He knew that she had HIV. It was a week later after that that the murder happened. She didn't tell Larry Dunn initially because she just wanted love and acceptance. While she did something wrong, clearly, that doesn't mean that he was justified in killing her.
Then, just weeks before Larry's murder trial is set to begin, a shocking development adds another, even more bizarre twist to the case.
He does not have HIV. He didn't get tested before killing her. He got tested 3 times while he was waiting for trial. They were all negative.
It's under this cloud of scandal and uncertainty that the state versus Larry Dunn gets underway. And despite the fact that Larry isn't HIV positive, many in the courtroom believe his self-defense claim will still win out.
You want to think it was an open shut case because, yeah, the guy confessed to stabbing her, but when you have to throw in that HIV, you're going to have an uphill battle.
Larry Dunn believed that he was justified in killing Cecily Bolden, and he thought that the jurors would agree with him.
From the prosecution's opening statement, their objective is clear: to minimize any sympathy jurors might feel for Larry Dunn.
The strategy was to focus on Larry Dunn's actions, that he was the cheating husband because he would sleep with women without using a condom and then come back and sleep with his wife.
Prosecutors assert that on September 6, 2012, more than a week after learning that Cecily was HIV positive, Larry drove to her home to have unprotected sex with her one last time. On the presumption that he too had contracted the disease, Larry entered Cecily's bedroom, hell-bent on revenge.
I think it was a premeditated attack. He knew exactly what he was doing. He laid down beside her and just stuck the knife right into her neck.
He could have taken steps to get help, to get information about HIV, to find out whether he actually had the virus. But he didn't do that. He went straight to rage.
Prosecutors also cite the physical evidence that ties Larry to the crime scene: the recovered murder weapon, his bloody car, and last but not least, his own confession.
How many times did you stab her?
Twice. I think twice. whatever's gonna happen really doesn't matter to me, man, because again, in my mind, I'm already dead, bro. I feel like she killed me, so I killed her.
Leaving Larry's own ominous words in the minds of the jury, the prosecution rests its case. But as defense attorneys prepare to call their first witness, an unexpected turn of events rocks the courtroom.
It's very unusual that that would happen. I really didn't think that he would do that.
Inside a Dallas courtroom, Larry Dunn is on trial for the murder of his 28-year-old mistress, Cecily Bolden. Prosecutors have alleged that this self-confessed philanderer intentionally stabbed Cecily to death a week after learning she had exposed him to the HIV virus.
They'd had sex a number of times, and then she decided to tell him. He went over there for revenge, had sex with her again, and killed her.
With prosecutors finished laying out their case, it's now Larry's attorney's turn to launch their defense. But before they even call their first witness, the case veers in an unexpected direction.
He told his defense attorney that he wanted to enter the guilty plea, and I was very surprised by that.
The community was shocked when Larry Dunn entered his guilty plea.
But even after entering a guilty plea, neither Larry nor his attorney is ready to throw in the towel. Their new plan is to establish sympathy for Larry at a different proceeding, his sentencing hearing.
The defense attorney basically didn't want to get up there and argue that he was not guilty when it was so clear that he was. He wanted to save the ammunition that he had to try to get him the lowest sentence he possibly could.
This ammunition takes the form of a legal doctrine known in Texas as the sudden passion defense.
The defendant must prove that he caused the death under the immediate influence of sudden passion. It reduces the offense to a second-degree felony offense.
Normally, the punishment range is 5 years in prison to 99 years in prison. If the jury makes a finding of sudden passion, then it is reduced from 2 years to 20 years.
At question is how much spontaneity, if any, governed Larry's impulse to kill.
You have to be caught in the moment. Sudden passion definitely has a time element. It can't be the result of former provocation.
Taking the stand on his own behalf, Larry reiterates what he told detectives during his confession a year earlier.
He in fact says himself, killing her wasn't on the menu, that's just how it ended up.
He says the more she talked about living with HIV and that it wasn't that bad, the angrier he got.
It's powerful testimony, but according to prosecutors, it doesn't amount to sudden impulse.
This wasn't a sudden passion issue because Larry Dunn had days to reflect on the fact that he had been exposed to HIV. And after he knew that, he went back, had sex with her again, and then decided to kill her.
For prosecutors, there's no better evidence of premeditation than a series of text messages that Cecily and Larry exchanged the days leading up to her murder.
He'd sent her 300 text messages in which they'd kept talking the whole time, including talking about her HIV status. He sent a lot of very graphic sexual text messages. His reaction was, I'm upset, I'm hurt, but it's okay, we'll be together.
According to prosecutors, these text messages prove without a doubt that Larry had been plotting Cecily's murder for days. The argument seems valid, but will the jury go along with it?
There was one juror who did not want to sentence Larry Dunn. We learned that he had an issue with Cecily Bolden, that he felt that Cecily Bolden had disrespected Larry Dunn.
They sent out a note saying that they were hung, and the judge, instead of declaring a mistrial, sent them back to continue deliberating.
On November 5th, 2013, jurors finally reach a unanimous decision. They sentence Larry Dunn to 40 years in prison.
The jury found that Larry Dunn had not acted in sudden passion. Had they done so, it would have reduced his sentence significantly.
My immediate reaction to what he got is good. Larry Dunn received 40 years. All right. Of course, he'll be an old fart when he get out.
Is 40 years enough for what he did? No. I'd have to ask my kids that. They'd probably say no.
And as the years go by, the death of Cecily Bolden has become a cautionary tale about ignorance and prejudice, a tragedy rooted in a lack of awareness about HIV.
I felt like she killed me, so I killed her.
Cecily Bolden was not killed because she was HIV positive. She was killed based on the miseducation and stigma that Larry had about the disease.
I feel like after she told you, you had choices, bro. I mean, after you found out, you had multiple choices. You had to kill her.
If Larry Dunn had felt like Sister Bolden gave him HIV, he could have followed her with the local authorities.
Though nothing can bring Cecily back, it's her loved ones' hope that her life will serve as both an inspiration to others living with the disease and as an example of just how deadly ignorance can be.
I want to make sure that the story doesn't go into the distance, that we are active as a community in educating people about HIV, making sure that people know that HIV is not this instant death sentence, so that those fears and stigmas are just not there.
The Trotter Chronicles, From Gold to Grit, a novelization by Gemini. Prologue, The Man in the Sharp Suit. The air in the office was thick with the scent of expensive mahogany and the faint, clinical aroma of high-end air purifiers. Justin, a man whose skin looked like it had been buffed by a professional at a Swiss spa, leaned back in his leather chair. He adjusted his glasses, looking at the two men sitting across from him. One of them, Derek Delboy Trotter, was a man who looked like he belonged in a very different kind of office one, with a calendar of a local garage on the wall and a lingering smell of cigar smoke and hopeful desperation. Del was dressed in what he considered his business best, a suit that shimmered just a bit too much under the fluorescent lights, and enough gold jewelry to make a pirate blush. Next to him sat Rodney, younger, leaner, and perpetually looking like he had just realized he'd left the oven on at home. Rodney was sweating, not the confident sweat of an athlete, but the cold, clammy moisture of a man who knew his brother was about to say something that would embarrass them both for the next century. "I've got all the basic details about your business career," Justin began, his voice smooth and devoid of any Peckham grit. "But what I'd like to do is to get an insight into the real you. How you started, how you became so successful, but more importantly, your lives and your raison d'etre." Del Boy's eyes lit up. He didn't know what a raison d'etre was, but it sounded French, and in Del's world, French meant class. "Oh, no," Del whispered to Rodney, "Laboratory Garney." Rodney closed his eyes and prayed for the floor to open. "It's not Laboratory Garney. Del," he hissed, "he's asking for our reason for being." "Exactly what I said. Prove," Del snapped back, before turning to Justin with a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo and then charge him for the delivery. "Well, Justin, where shall I start? Up to a few years ago, we were just very ordinary people living. Well, very ordinary lives. Weren't we, Rodney?" And so, the story began. A story of a watch found in a garage. A fortune made in an instant. and a fall so spectacular it made the Hindenburg look like a minor fender bender. Chapter 1, The Caribbean Dream. The sun over Barbados didn't just shine, it announced itself. It turned the turquoise water into a sheet of diamonds and the white sand into something so bright it hurt to look at without designer sunglasses, which, of course, the Trotters were wearing. Only a few months prior, the Trotters had been living in a council flat in Peckham, wondering if the hooky VCers they were selling would last through the first reel of Rambo. Then came the watch, an 18th century Harrison marine chronometer hidden in their garage for decades. It had sold at Sotheby's for £6.5 million. In an instant, Derek Trotter, the man who once sold one-legged turkeys at Christmas, was a multimillionaire. Look at this, Rodney, Dell had said, leaning over the balcony of their private villa. He was holding a glass of something blue with a miniature umbrella in it. Total luxury. This is what we were born for. Mange tout, Rodney, mange tout. Rodney was sitting in a hammock, trying to read a book on sociology, but failing because Cassandra kept applying sun cream to his back. It's a bit much, isn't it, Dell? I mean, 6 months ago we were sharing a bathroom with a leak that Uncle Albert called characterful. Characterful. It was a health hazard. Dell laughed. But look at us now. We've divvied the dosh up. We made sure Uncle Albert got a nice little drink, figuratively speaking, though knowing him, he's probably literally drinking most of it down on the coast with Elsie Partridge. They had been the kings of the island. They donated to charity mostly because Dell liked the gala dinners, and they invested. Oh, how they invested. Dell had met a man in a bar. A visionary, Dell called him. A con artist, Rodney had countered. The man spoke of Central American markets, of vibrant ventures, and emerging economies. He spoke of turning millions into billions. It was a royal mint. Rodney, Dell shouted into the tropical wind. We were making money while we slept. But the Caribbean sun has a way of blinding you to the clouds on the horizon. Chapter 2, The Sound of the Crash. The end didn't come with a bang. It came with a phone call and a decline message on a credit card at a 5-star hotel. What do you mean? Insufficient funds. Dell had barked at the hotel manager, his gold rings clacking against the marble countertop. Do you know who I am? I'm Derek Trotter. I've got more money than the Sultan of Brunei's paperboy. The manager was polite but firm. The Central American market hadn't just dipped, it had evaporated. A coup, a currency collapse, and a series of creative accounting errors by their visionary friend had turned the Trotter fortune into a pile of worthless digital ash. Rodney, Dell whispered, his face turning a shade of gray that matched the London fog they had tried so hard to escape. The negotiations. They've collapsed. Collapsed. Rodney felt his stomach drop. Dell, we put everything into that venture. The houses, the stocks, The peacocks. I know. Dell said, his bravado finally cracking. We've even paid for this hotel on a credit card. A credit card which has now been withdrawn. The journey back to the UK was a blur of cramped airplane seats and the crushing realization that the dream was over. They weren't returning to a hero's welcome. They were returning to a financial wilderness. And it wasn't just them. Back in Peckham, the ripples of their failure were turning into waves. Michael Fisher, the landlord of the Nag's Head and a man who had trusted Dell with his life savings, was now behind bars. He had remortgaged the pub to follow the Trotter gold mine, and when it collapsed, he had tried to recoup the losses by embezzling from the brewery. He was a desperate man, and Dell felt the weight of every brick in Mike's prison cell. Chapter 3, The Court of Peckham. The corridors of the courthouse felt like a tomb. Denzel, a man whose nerves were usually held together by habit and hope, was pacing so fast he was nearly burning a hole in the linoleum. Denzel, sit down, Albert's voice echoed. Denzel stopped and looked at the group gathered. There was Trigger, looking as vacant as a Sunday morning in a library. There was Boyke, looking smug despite the circumstances. And there was Sid, the cafe owner, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I can't, Albert, Denzel groaned. I've never been a character witness before. I'm worried. I think those made a terrible mistake having us for here. It's like inviting the Manson family to dinner. Don't be so dramatic, Trigger said, staring at a fly on the wall. I'm going to tell them I hear voices. Trigger, you're not the one on trial, Denzel hissed. I know, Trigger replied simply, but I still hear voices. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was even grimmer. The Inland Revenue was a beast that didn't care about mange tout or lovely jubbly. They wanted their pound of flesh, and they wanted it in sterling. Dell and Rodney stood before the judge. The properties were gone. The cars were gone. The peacocks had probably been repossessed by a very confused bailiff. Are there any mitigating circumstances? Their lawyer asked. Dell stepped forward, adjusting his tie. Oh, yes, you must remember to tell them that we were slaves to detail, wouldn't you, Rodney? We made certain that we always got our checks off to the Inland Revenue on time. Always, Rodney added, his voice cracking. Fair dues, Dell whispered as the judge looked down at them. They bounced, but they was always on time. The verdict was swift. Bankruptcy. They weren't going to prison, not yet, but they were being stripped of everything. The debt stood at $48,750 for pounds. It was a number that haunted those dreams. It wasn't just money, it was the price of his pride. Chapter 4, The Wrong Gentleman. Amidst the financial ruins, a personal tragedy struck. Uncle Albert, the man who had survived the Battle of the Atlantic only to be nearly killed by those cooking 1,000 times, had passed away. The funeral was a somber affair, or it should have been. The Trotters arrived at the cemetery, faces long and hearts heavy. I feel bad. You know, Dell whispered to Rodney as they walked toward the open grave, leaving him here on his own while we was all off globe-trotting. He wasn't on his own, Dell, Rodney said. He had Elsie. He was happy. They stood by the grave, listening to the vicar speak of a man named Bunny who had served in the RAF. Bunny, Dell frowned. Why did he call him Bunny? Well, that's what they called him in the RAF, didn't they? A stranger next to them whispered, because his surname was Warren. Dell froze. He looked at the headstone. He looked at the grieving widow, who was definitely not Elsie Partridge. He looked at the photo of the deceased man who looked remarkably like Albert, but was missing the signature during the war beard. Rodney, Dell hissed, his eyes wide. Is that a Spitfire on the coffin? Yeah, Rodney whispered back. We're at the wrong funeral. They retreated with the quiet dignity of two men who had just realized they were mourning a complete stranger. It was the perfect metaphor for their lives, showing up with good intentions only to realize they were in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong dead relative. Chapter 5. New Management. Back at Nelson Mandela House, the flat felt smaller than it used to. The wallpaper was peeling, and the ghost of their millionaire lifestyle lingered in the form of a single, half-empty bottle of expensive cognac. The firm's been liquidated, Rodney said, staring at the kitchen table. Trotter's Independent Traders is no more. It's Capit. No, 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 Dell said, his mind racing. The firm can go on trading. It's just that I've been disqualified from running it. That doesn't mean to say I can't work for it. He looked at Rodney, really looked at him. We need a new managing director, Dell mused. Someone young, someone enthusiastic, someone full of ideas. Rodney looked around the room. Who? The window cleaner. No, Rodney, you. Rodney's jaw dropped. Me? Dell, I can't run a company. I can't even run a bath without getting a headache. Legally, there is nothing to stop you, Dell insisted. You're clean. No bankruptcy, no disqualification. You'd be the boss. Rodney Trotter, managing director. And so, the power dynamic shifted. Within days, the local paper carried a small advertisement, Trotter's Independent Traders, now under new management. Managing director, Rodney Trotter. Rodney took to the role with a terrifying level of seriousness. He started wearing a tie at breakfast. He spoke about executive stress and logistical paradigms. He even tried to listen to Mozart to unwind. Mozart's Symphony No. 38 in D major. Rodney explained to Trigger one evening in the flat. I find it helps me ease my executive stress. Trigger nodded slowly. Ain't there no words to this, Dave? No, Trigger, it's instrumental. Dell watched his brother with a mix of pride and annoyance. He was back in the game, even if he was technically just the staff. But the debt to the taxman still loomed. They needed a big score. They needed a miracle. And then the phone rang. Chapter 6, The Gold Rush. The studio lights were blinding. Jonathan Ross, a man who seemed to be made of charisma and expensive hair products, smiled at the camera. "Welcome to Gold Rush," he announced, "the fastest game show on TV. This is the show where you can win anything from £1 to 100,000 pounds. In the contestants' seat sat Derek Trotter. He had lied about his hobbies, claiming to love 16th century Italian Renaissance art instead of seeing what fell off the back of a lorry. And he had navigated the early rounds with the cunning of a street fox. He reached the final stages. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knockoff Swiss Army knife. For 50,000 pounds, Derek, Jonathan Ross said, leaning in, which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and The Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Dell felt the sweat prickling under his shimmery suit. He knew this, or he thought he knew it, but his brain was a jumble of French phrases and Peckham market prices. "I'm going to have to use me old SOS, aren't I?" Dell said, his voice trembling. "I'll call my brother, Rodney." Back at the flat, Rodney and Cassandra were dressed in their fantasy therapy outfits, Rodney as a gladiator and Cassandra as a police officer. It was supposed to be a quiet night of memory baggage unloading. The phone screamed. "Hello," Rodney snapped, assuming it was their annoying neighbor, Mickey Pierce. "Piss off, Mickey, you're getting on my tits now." "Rodney, it's Jonathan Ross." The silence that followed was deafening. Rodney realized he had just told one of the most famous men in Britain to piss off. "Rodney, we need your help," Jonathan said, hurried. "Derek is on 25,000, going for 50. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and The Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo?" Rodney didn't hesitate. He had to GCEs. He had been listening to Mozart for a week. He was an executive. "Ravel," Rodney said with absolute certainty. 100%. "Dell, it's Ravel." Dell turned back to the camera, his chest puffed out. "I'll go with that, Jonathan. It's Ravel." Jonathan Ross looked at him with a face full of pity. "Derek, that was the wrong answer. It was Rodrigo." The world seemed to stop spinning. Dell's face went through every shade of red known to man. He had lost it all. Again. On national television. Chapter 7, The Phoenix of Peckham. The silence in the flat that night was heavy. Dell sat on the sofa, still wearing his game show suit, staring at the floor. Raquel was in the kitchen, and Rodney was hiding in his room, probably trying to find a way to dismantle his gladiator armor without making a sound. The phone rang. "If that's Mickey Pierce," Dell growled, picking it up, "I'm going to murder him." "Hello, is this Derek Trotter?" A voice asked. It sounded professional. This is the producer of Gold Rush. Del rolled his eyes. Oh, give it a rest, Mickey. I can hear the jukebox in the Nag's Head from here. No, Mr. Trotter, this is serious. We've made a mistake. Our researchers checked the facts. Ravel did write the music for the child and the enchantment. Even though he's a composer and not primarily a guitarist, the question was flawed. Del sat up straight. A mistake? You mean I was right? You were right. We're offering you the 50,000 pounds or the chance to come back and play for the 100,000. Del looked at the room. He looked at Rodney, who had peeked his head out of the bedroom door. He looked at Raquel, who was standing in the doorway with hope in her eyes. Give all the money to charity, Del shouted into the phone, his old bravado returning in a rush of adrenaline. And if you phone here once again, I'm going to come down there and kick your arse into shredded duck. Goodbye. He slammed the phone down. Del, Rodney screamed. What are you doing? That was 50 grand. Del started to laugh. A deep, wheezing Peckham laugh. It was Mickey Pierce, Rodney. I could hear the jukebox. He thought he could wind me up, but nobody winds up Derek Trotter. He stood up, adjusting his cuffs. We're the Trotters, Rodney. We don't need charity. We're back in business. New management, new ideas. This time next year. Rodney sighed, but he couldn't help but smile. We'll be millionaires? No, Del said, throwing an arm around his brother's shoulder. This time next year. We'll be debt-free. And that, Rodney, is bonjour. It's bonjour, Del, Rodney corrected. Exactly what I said. Prove exactly what I said. The neon sign of the Nag's Head flickered in the distance, a beacon of hope in the heart of Peckham. The Trotters were down, but they were never out. Because as long as there was a deal to be made and a brother to blame, the dream would never die. Chapter 8. The Cold Light of Day. The following morning did not bring the clarity Del Boy had hoped for. Instead, it brought a pounding headache and the lingering suspicion that he might have made a catastrophic tactical error. He sat at the formica table in the kitchen, nursing a mug of tea that was mostly sugar. Rodney stumbled in, looking disheveled. Del, Rodney said, his voice flat. I've been thinking about that phone call last night. Forget it, Rodney, Del snapped. Mickey Pierce, professional wind-up merchant, probably recorded the whole thing to play at the pub later. Low D toilet, Rodney. Water under the bridge. Del, I went to the pub this morning to get some milk because the fridge is on the blink again. And Mickey Pierce was there. He looked as miserable as a rainy Tuesday in Margate. Apparently, his latest business ventures selling laser-cut toast just failed. He didn't even have enough credit on his phone to make a prank call. Del froze, his mug halfway to his lips. What? And there's more. Sid showed me the morning paper. There's a small headline on page 12. Game show blunder. BBC apologizes to Peckham contestant over classical music gaffe. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. You could hear the distant rumble of the 171 bus and the slow, rhythmic dripping of the leaky tap. So, Del whispered, his voice barely audible. It wasn't Mickey. It was the producer. Del, you told the BBC to give £50,000 to charity in the name of the Trotters. Del Boy put his mug down. He stared at the wall, at the framed picture of their mother. Well, he said, his voice suddenly bright and brittle. At least we'll get a plaque or a mention in the newsletter. It's tax deductible, ain't it? We don't pay tax. Del, we're bankrupt, Rodney shouted. Details, Rodney, details. Del stood up, pacing the small kitchen. This is just a temporary setback, a minor hiccup in the grand tapestry of Trotter fortunes. We're under new management. Remember, Managing Director Rodney Trotter. What's our first move, boss? Rodney looked at the pile of unpaid bills on the counter. Our first move is to find something to sell. Something that doesn't involve the Sultan of Brunei or the BBC. Chapter 9, The Electronic Revolution. Rodney's first official act as managing director was to meet with Monkey Harris. Monkey was a man who lived up to his name short, agile, and always looking for a way to climb a bit higher on the social ladder. He met Rodney in the back of a van parked behind the Nag's Head. I've got a consignment. Rodney, Monkey whispered, opening a cardboard box. Electronic personal organizers. Top of the range. They tell the time, store 500 names, and have a built-in calculator. They're selling like crazy in the West End. Rodney picked one up. It was a sleek, black plastic device that looked like something from a low-budget sci-fi movie. How much? For you, a tenner apiece. I've got 200 of them. Rodney calculated. 200 at £10 was 2,000. If they sold them for 30, that was for £1,000 profit. It wasn't 50,000, but it was a start. I'll take them, Rodney said, trying to sound executive. But I'll need to pay in installments. Cash flow, you understand? Monkey nodded. I understand. Cash flow is the soul of business. I'll drop them off at Nelson Mandela House tonight. When Rodney returned to the flat, he found Del Boy trying to fix the washing machine with a bent coat hanger. Good news, Del. I've secured our first inventory. Electronic personal organizers. The future of business. We're going to modernize Peckham. One address book at a time. Del looked at the device. Electronic organizers. People round here can barely organize a trip to the toilet. Rodney, who's going to buy these? Everyone. Busy professionals, students, anyone who needs to stay on top of their game. It's executive stress management. Del, der chic. Del said, his eyes narrowing. They look a bit Plastic. Are they waterproof? Why would they need to be waterproof? In case it rains on the market stall. Rodney, think. Avoirdupois. Chapter 10. Iconoclastic autosuggestion. While the business world was being revolutionized by plastic organizers, the domestic world of the Trotters was entering the realm of fantasy therapy. Cassandra had insisted, after the stress of the bankruptcy and the game show disaster, she felt their relationship needed a reboot. She had found a book by an American psychologist who spoke of memory baggage and the need to create our own make-believe world. Iconoclastic autosuggestion. Rodney explained to Del Boy while they were sorting the organizers. It's about rejecting reality and becoming different people, just for an evening. Sounds like what I've been doing for 40 years. Rodney, Del quipped. What's the catch? We write down our fantasy figures, and then we become them. No dressing up. It's all in the mind. But as with everything in the Trotter household, the no dressing up rule was the first to go. Thursday night arrived. Del had agreed to take Raquel and Damien out to see a film, giving Rodney and Cassandra the flat to themselves. Or so Rodney thought. I'm taking them to see that new cartoon, Del said, adjusting his coat, the one about the singing fish. We'll be back late. Enjoy your autosuggestion. Rodney waited until the door closed. He went to his bedroom and emerged 10 minutes later wearing a leather skirt, a plastic chest plate, and sandals. He looked like he had been rejected from a high school production of Spartacus. Cassandra emerged from the bathroom. She was wearing a police uniform, complete with a hat and a plastic truncheon. Rodney, she gasped. I thought we said no dressing up. I couldn't help it. Cass, the book said to fully immerse yourself. I'm Russell Crowe in Gladiator. And I'm a detective from the Bill. Cassandra sighed. You look different. Strength and honor, Cassandra, Rodney said, striking a pose that nearly caused his chest plate to pop off. Now, let us unload our baggage. They sat on the sofa, trying to be reborn, but the atmosphere was somewhat dampened by the smell of those lingering cigar smoke and the faint sound of the neighbor's heavy metal music. So, Rodney began, trying to deepen his voice. On my signal, unleash the feelings. Rodney, I don't feel like a detective. I feel like an idiot. That's just the memory baggage talking. Rejected. You are an officer of the law. I am a hero of Rome. Suddenly, the front door burst open. We're back, Del Boy shouted, stumbling in with Raquel and Damien. The cinema was full. Apparently, every kid in Peckham wants to see a singing fish. He stopped dead. He looked at Rodney. He looked at Cassandra. Oh, my God, Del whispered, his eyes widening. Rodney, what have you done to her? Is she arresting you? It's therapy, Del. Rodney hissed, trying to hide behind a cushion. Go away. Therapy, you look like you're about to fight a lion in a police station. Del started to laugh. A deep, wheezing sound. Raquel, come and see this. Russell Crowe and the Bill are having a meeting in our front room. The fantasy was officially over. Reality hadn't just returned, it had kicked the door down and started laughing at them. Chapter 11, The Sultan's Shadow. A few days later, the executive's stress was reaching a fever pitch. The organizers weren't selling as well as Rodney hoped, mostly because people in Peckham preferred to write their numbers on the back of cigarette packets. Rodney was sitting at the kitchen table, Mozart playing softly in the background, when the phone rang. Trotter's Independent Traders, Managing Director Rodney Trotter speaking, he said, trying to sound bored and important. Good evening, a voice said with a thick, exotic accent. I am wishing to speak with Managing Director. Rodney's eyes narrowed. This is he. Who is calling? My name is Asif Hazen. I am representative of Sultan of Brunei. Rodney rolled his eyes. He looked at Delboy, who was pretending to read the paper, but was clearly listening. The Sultan of Brunei, Rodney repeated loudly. Well, how can I be of assistance, sir? His Highness has seen your advertisement in the newspaper. He is very impressed with your party planning and consultancy. Is he now? Rodney smirked. And what does His Highness want? Does he want me to fly out and organize a palace warming? Exactly. He wants you to fly to Brunei. All expenses paid. He has bought a crappy old three-wheeled van, and he wants to know where to start it on cold mornings. Rodney's smirk vanished. He slammed the phone down. Shove it, Mickey, he yelled at the dead line. Just shove it. What happened? Del asked, looking up. Dave's just had a big row with the Sultan of Brunei. It was Mickey Pierce, Del. I could hear the jukebox. He thinks he's so clever, using an accent. But as Rodney sat back down, his Mozart symphony reached a crescendo. He looked at the advertisement he had placed. He had listed consultancy and party planning. It was a professional advert. He looked at the phone. For a fleeting second, he wondered, what if the Sultan of Brunei really did have an old van? What if he really did need a consultant from Peckham? Del, Rodney whispered, do you think? Don't worry, Rodney, Del said, patting him on the shoulder. The world's full of surprises. Look at Nicky Pierce, he's only just learned to read. They sat in the quiet flat, to brothers bound by blood, bankruptcy, and a never-ending cycle of nearly and almost. They were back where they started, in Nelson Mandela House, with a mountain of debt and a box of plastic organizers. But as the neon sign of the Nags had flickered outside, Del Boy looked at his brother. This time next year, Rodney, he said, the old spark returning to his eyes. This time next year, we'll have sold all them organizers. We'll be back on top. Mange tout, Rodney, mange tout. And in the heart of Peckham, that was enough. The end of Volume I, The Peckham Phoenix, a novelization of the Trotter Chronicles. Chapter 1, The Yellow Ghost of Peckham. The yellow three-wheeled Reliant Regal then rattled through the streets of Peckham like a skeletal remains of a decade everyone else had tried to forget. On its side, the faded lettering still defiantly proclaimed Trotter's Independent Traders, New York, Paris, Peckham. It was a lie, of course. They had been to Paris briefly. They had never been to New York, and Peckham was currently trying its best to pretend they didn't exist. Derek Delboy Trotter sat behind the wheel, his rings catching the stray glints of a London sun that looked like it had been filtered through a greasy chip wrapper. He was humming the theme tune to his own life, a melody of seasons changing and tides turning. "I'll fetch the suitcase from the van," he muttered to himself, a mantra of the perpetual salesman. Beside him sat Rodney. Rodney, the graduate with 2 GCEs and a brain that was currently a chaotic blender of existential dread and marital anxiety. Rodney was looking at the dashboard as if it were a ticking bomb. "What's up with you, Rodney?" Dell asked, his voice a gravelly mix of concern and irritation. "You look like a man who's just found out his lottery ticket was for last week's draw." "I'm a bit nervous, Dell," Rodney admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "This bloke we're going to see, this Justin, he's a documentary maker, right? He's not going to be asking me anything personal about my private life." Dell swung the van around the corner with the grace of a shopping trolley in a hurricane. "Of course he ain't. We're not that private, are we? We're public figures, the Trotters of Nelson Mandela House. But what about, me and Cassandra, our hiccups?" Dell rolled his eyes. "He's not going to want to know about your little problems in the bedroom department, Rodney. Though, strictly speaking, if you're having hiccups in the bedroom, you're probably doing it wrong." "I told you that in confidence," Rodney hissed, his face reddening to the color of a ripe tomato. "And I'm keeping it in confidence," Dell shouted back. "I'm not going to be telling him about jiffins and what Cassandra wears. I've got more class than that, mostly." Chapter 2, The Interrogator. Justin was the kind of man who wore spectacles not because he needed them, but because they made his expensive degree look even more expensive. His office was a minimalist vacuum of white walls and overpriced Scandinavian furniture. He looked at the Trotter brothers as if they were a rare species of beetle that had accidentally crawled onto his silk tie. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Justin said, his voice dripping with the practiced sincerity of a BBC middle manager. "It's been a particularly busy morning. Now, I've got all the basic details about your business career, the watches, the bottled water, the pre-war lead soldiers. But what I'd like to do is to get an insight into the real you." Dell leaned back, crossing his legs and adjusting his tie. He felt at home. Give Del Boy an audience and a chance to rewrite history, and he was more dangerous than a shark in a tuxedo. How you started, how you became so successful, Justin continued, leaning forward, but more importantly, your lives and your raison d'etre. Del blinked. Oh, no. Laboratory Garni. I don't use that stuff. It's all natural, this hair. Rodney groaned into his hands. He means reason for being. Del. I knew that. Del snapped. I was just checking if he did. Right then, Justin. Where shall I start? Up to a few years ago, we were just very ordinary people living very ordinary lives. Weren't we, Rodney? Rodney gave a hollow laugh. Ordinary. Del, our childhood involved hiding from the rent collector behind a sofa that was technically also being repossessed. Details, details. Del waved a hand dismissively. And then, as you know, one day I discovered an historic and almost priceless artifact. A watch. A Harrison Lesser watch. Found it in the back of a garage. It was like a sign from the gods of commerce. Chapter 3, The Golden Age. For a brief, shimmering moment in the mid-90s, the Trotters had been kings. The novel of their lives had transitioned from a gritty social drama to a glossy jet-set thriller. Anyway, Del continued, his eyes glazing over with the memory of pure, unadulterated wealth. At first, we didn't know what to do with it. We thought about donating it to the British Museum as a national treasure. We really did. We felt a sense of duty to the crown. We thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Rodney corrected. And then we decided to flog it. Del grinned. 6.5 million quid, Justin. Can you imagine that? 6.5 million of the Queen's finest nuggets. We divvied the dosh up, making sure our Uncle Albert got a nice little drink, bless his old seafaring soul, and we thought of others. We donated to charity. Enormously, of course. We bought a round of drinks for the whole Nag's Head, Rodney whispered. That was our charity work. It felt like a charity, Del insisted. Have you seen the state of Trigger? He needs all the help he can get. So, eventually, we had to start thinking about our future. We sought out a city stockbroker, a man with a tie thinner than a strand of spaghetti and a brain like a calculator. He advised us to invest in a new and vibrant venture, a Central American market. Del stood up, pacing the small office. It was attracting massive funds from all over the world. We were making more money than the Royal Mint. We weren't just flat, Justin. We were ascendant. Chapter 4, The Fall of the Empire. The flashback in Del's mind was vivid. He remembered the heat of the Caribbean, the smell of expensive sun cream, and the feeling of a platinum credit card in his pocket, a card that felt like it had the power to stop the rotation of the earth if he swiped it hard enough. He remembered Raquel, his significant other, looking like a movie star in a wide-brimmed hat, he remembered young Damien, the fruit of his loins, playing on the deck of a yacht. He remembered Rodney and Cassandra, looking like they finally belonged in a world where the wine didn't come from a box. And then the music changed. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was the sound of a phone not ringing. It was the sight of a computer screen flickering with red numbers that shouldn't have been there. She's into superstitions. The radio had been playing in the hotel lobby. Livin' La Vida Loca. It turned out, Del said, his voice dropping an octave, that negotiations between the Central American countries had collapsed, wiped out. The market didn't just crash. It evaporated. It was like someone had pulled the plug on the ocean. We'd even paid for the hotel on a credit card. Rodney added, the ghost of the trauma still visible in his eyes. A credit card which was withdrawn while we were still at the breakfast buffet. I was halfway through a bowl of exotic fruit, and suddenly I was an international pauper. Del nodded solemnly, but Derek Trotter is, if nothing else, a creative businessman. I came up with a solution. We had to leave. Fast. We ran, Rodney said. We literally ran for the airport while the concierge was still looking for the bill. Chapter 5. The Financial Wilderness. The return to the UK was not met with a ticker-tape parade. The news of the Trotter collapse had traveled faster than a Peckham rumor. How long did it take for the news to hit the UK? Justin asked, scribbling notes furiously. About as long as it took for someone to push a button on the internet. Del sighed. Suddenly, all our so-called business associates wouldn't return our calls. We were cast into a financial wilderness. It was like the desert, but with more rain and less sand. And then there was Mike. Rodney reminded him. Dole's face darkened. Mike Fisher, the landlord of the Nag's Head, a man who had seen the Trotters as his ticket out of the pub trade. Mike invested his life savings in our venture, Del explained. He actually remortgaged the pub. He's in prison now, awaiting trial. The fraud squad claims he tried to recoup his losses by embezzling the brewery. Never was a man more innocent. He confessed to everything, Del, Rodney pointed out. He was under duress. Del shouted, the pressure of the brewing industry is immense. The narrative shifted to the waiting room of the court. The atmosphere was thick with the smell of cheap coffee and the nervous sweat of Peckham's finest. Denzel was pacing, wearing the marble floor down. Uncle Albert was sitting there, looking like a weary old owl. Trigger was. Well, Trigger was staring at a wall, possibly having a conversation with his own shadow. Trig, if I go in there and tell the truth, Denzel had said, Del and Rodney are going to be spending the next 5 years sharpening Jeffrey Archer's pencils. I'm going to tell them I hear voices. Trigger had replied with the terrifying sincerity of the truly confused. Chapter 6. The Wrong Side of the Grave. The funeral of Uncle Albert should have been a moment of dignified sorrow. Instead, it was a master class in Trotter-esque absurdity. The family stood in the biting cold of a coastal cemetery. Dell was genuinely heartbroken. Albert had been their anchor, the man who had survived the Battle of the Baltic only to be nearly killed by those cooking. I feel bad, Dell whispered to Rodney as they stood by the grave, leaving him here on his own while we were off globe-trotting. We should have taken him to Barbados. He didn't have a passport, Dell, Rodney reminded him. He thought the Germans were still looking for him. They stood amongst a group of strangers. A woman named Marion was crying. A man named Roland was complaining about Albert's wartime sagas. God, he did go on, didn't he? Roland sneered. Never bloody stopped. The John Wayne of the East End. Dell's blood began to simmer. It reached boiling point. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing. You got to remember that a lot of blokes lost their lives for our liberty, just so that 50 years later, prats like you would have the freedom to knock them. You want to go outside and have a chat, Roland? Calm down, Dell, Rodney pleaded. It was only when the young boy, Damien, looked up at a passing plane and asked if it was a Spitfire that the reality hit them. Wait a minute, Dell said, looking at the headstone. Bunny. Why did you call him Bunny? Because his surname was Warren, Roland said. Albert Warren. Raff. The silence that followed was heavy. Rodney, Dell whispered, his face turning ashen. We're at the wrong funeral. Oh, let's go. Rodney hissed, grabbing Bill's arm. They fled the cemetery like grave robbers who had forgotten their shovels. Chapter 7, The Phoenix Arises, sort of. Back in Nelson Mandela House, the grandeur of the millionaire years felt like a dream someone else had had. The flat was cramped, the wallpaper was peeling, and the Inland Revenue was knocking on the door with the persistence of a woodpecker on a metal pole. The court declared me bankrupt, Dell announced to the family. But don't worry, I've worked it all out. I'm a trader. I could sell rice to the Chinese. The firm's been liquidized, Dell, Rodney said, sitting at the kitchen table. Disqualified, Dell corrected. I've been disqualified from running it. That doesn't mean the company is dead. We just need a new managing director. Someone young. Someone enthusiastic. Someone with to GCEs. Rodney looked up, a glimmer of hope or madness in his eyes. Me? Yes, you, Rodney. You can take over Trotter's independent traders. Legally, there's nothing to stop you. You're clean, mostly. And so, the new era began. Rodney Trotter, managing director, Dell took a back seat, or rather, he sat in the front seat and shouted directions while Rodney tried to drive. They were back in business. They were trading again. The goal, $48,750 for pounds. That was the debt. That was the mountain they had to climb. Chapter 8, The Golden Ticket. The idea for Gold Rush came to Dell like a divine revelation during a late-night session of channel hopping. "It's a game show, Rodney," Dell shouted, bursting into the living room. "Jonathan Ross, you can win 100,000 quid. It's the fastest game show on TV. Dell, you think King Edward introduced the potato to England?" Rodney said flatly. "I didn't hear the question properly." Dell insisted. "I've worked it out. I'm going to apply. This time next year, we'll be millionaires. Again. This time last week, we were millionaires," Cassandra pointed out from the kitchen. But Dell was already filling out the form. He wasn't just a bankrupt salesman from Peckham anymore. In his mind, he was a Renaissance man, a lover of fine wines, the theater, and 16th century Italian art. He was Derek Trotter, and the world hadn't seen the last of him. Chapter 9, The Brunei Connection. The telephone in the Trotter household was a fickle instrument. Sometimes it brought news of a consignment of hooky VCers. Other times, it was just the electric company wondering if Dell intended to pay his bill within the current century. One evening, as Rodney was trying to maintain a facade of managing director gravitas, the phone rang. "Trotter's Independent Traders. How may I help you?" Rodney said, his voice an octave deeper than usual. "Good evening," a voice responded, accented and dripping with importance. "I am wishing to speak with managing director." "This is he," Rodney said, puffing out his chest. "My name is Rodney Trotter. I am representative of the Sultan of Brunei," the voice continued. Rodney's heart did a little tap dance against his ribs. He looked at Dell, who was currently trying to clean a fake Rolex with a bit of spit and a rag. "Dell, it's the Sultan of Brunei." Dell stopped rubbing the watch. "Yeah, and I'm the Pope's golf partner. Give it here." But Rodney was already hooked. "How may I be of assistance, sir?" "His Highness has seen your advertisement in the newspaper. He would like you to fly to Brunei and be his consultant." Rodney's eyes glazed over. He could see it now. Gold-plated yachts, silk robes, and a world where duty-free wasn't just a suggestion. Consultant. On what, specifically? Recently, the voice said, suppressed laughter starting to bubble through the accent, His Highness bought a crappy old three-wheeled van, and he wants to know how to start it on cold mornings. The line exploded into the unmistakable, high-pitched cackle of Mickey Pierce. Rodney slammed the phone down. I knew it was him. I was just winding him up. Dell shook his head. Rodney, you're about as good at winding people up as a sundial in a coal cellar. Get back to your paperwork. Chapter 10, Fantasy Therapy. Rodney's marriage to Cassandra was, in his own words, a series of minor hiccups in the bedroom department. To address this, Rodney had turned to the modern equivalent of a witch doctor, a lifestyle magazine. It's called Fantasy Therapy. Cass, Rodney explained that night. His voice hushed. This expert in America says our troubles stem from memory baggage. We need to become different people, reborn. Cassandra looked at him over the top of her book. Different people. Do I get to be someone who lives in a house without a yellow vent parked outside? No, it's about iconoclastic autosuggestion. Rodney insisted. We write down our fantasy figure, and for one night, the other person becomes that figure. No dressing up required. It's all in the mind. All right, Cassandra sighed. I'll try anything to stop you talking about memory baggage. They wrote down their choices. Cassandra handed her slip to Rodney. He opened it and blinked. The bill. You want me to be a copper? Just a position of authority. Rodney, she said, a mischief glint in her eye. Rodney's own fantasy involved a certain gladiator, or maybe a heroic figure from a film he'd seen recently. He didn't say it, but he had a plan. The next evening, the plan went horribly wrong. Dell burst into the flat to find Cassandra dressed in a full policewoman's uniform, complete with a baton and a look of professional disapproval. Rodney, on the other hand, was standing there in a leather tunic, looking like he'd been rejected from a low-budget production of Spartacus. Oh, my God, Dell shouted, nearly dropping his bag of takeaway. I thought we were being raided. Cassandra, I didn't know you'd joined the force. And Rodney, what are you? A Roman centurion with a vitamin D deficiency. It's a fancy dress party. Dell, Rodney yelled, his face turning a shade of purple that matched his tunic. We're going to a party. My ex-boss at the bank invited us. At 5:30, Dell asked, skeptical, a bit early for a rave, isn't it? It's an early party for people who have to be up for work. Rodney grabbed Cassandra's arm. Come on, Reg Hollis. Let's go before he starts asking for our badges. Chapter 11, The Lights of Gold Rush. The BBC television studios were a labyrinth of cables, tired security guards, and the smell of industrial-grade hairspray. Dell stood in the wings of the Gold Rush set, adjusting his suit. He told the producers he was a connoisseur of the arts. He'd told them his hobbies included fine wines and 16th century Italian Renaissance art. In reality, his knowledge of fine wine stopped at anything that didn't have a screw top. And the only Renaissance art he owned was a framed picture of a crying boy that he'd bought at a car boot sale in 1984. Welcome to another edition of the show that is taking the country by storm. The voice of Jonathan Ross boomed through the speakers. This is Thursday. This is live. This is Jonathan Ross, and this is Gold Rush. Dell stepped onto the stage, his smile fixed, his rings gleaming under the studio lights. Beside him were his competitors, Mike Wallace, a financial advisor who looked like he'd swallowed a lemon, and Janice Scott, who seemed genuinely terrified of the cameras. And finally, Ross announced, we have Derek Trotter from Peckham. Derek is a businessman who lives with Raquel, his significant other. His pastimes include fine wines, the theater, and 16th century Italian Renaissance art. Del gave a thumbs up. Lovely jubbly. Jonathan, just happy to be here for the culture, you know. Chapter 12, The Rainbow Road. The game began with a flurry of questions. Del's finger was poised over the buzzer like a predator waiting for a slow-moving gazelle. Whose famous diary recorded the plague and the Great Fire of London? Ross asked. Del hit the buzzer. Mrs. Dale's. The studio went silent. Ross blinked. Nice try, Del, but I'm afraid that's not right. You're frozen now. Eventually, through a series of fluke errors by his opponents, Del found himself as the first challenger on the Rainbow Road. He stood in the center of the stage, a 1-pound coin clutched in his hand, his guaranteed prize. Whatever else happens, that's yours, Ross said. Just make sure it ain't Irish, eh? Del quipped, winking at the camera. He breezed through the early rounds. He knew Kilimanjaro was in Africa mostly because he'd once tried to sell a crate of T-shirts with the mountain printed on the wrong side. He survived a challenge from Janice. The money climbed. 10,000, 25,000. And then the green question. In which state was President Kennedy born? Del hesitated. He remembered the news footage. He remembered the tragedy. Well, when he was assassinated in 1963, he was in a terrible state. He died. I need the name of the state. Del, Ross urged. Texas, Florida, or California? Del sweated. He used his shot in the dark. Florida, he shouted. No, Ross sighed. It was Texas. But you played your shot, so you're still in the game for the penalty question. Chapter 13, The Ravel Debacle. The penalty question was worth 50,000 pounds. If Del got it right, he'd move to the final gold question for 100,000. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and the Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Del's brain stalled. Classical music. He was a man of the people. He liked the theme from Z Cars and anything by Tom Jones. He needed his SOS. He needed his brother. My brother, Rodney, Del said, he's a graduate to GCEs. He knows his classics. Back in the flat, the phone rang. Rodney, still in his Spartacus tunic, answered it. Hello, Rodney. It's Jonathan Ross. Oh, piss off. Mickey, you're getting on my tits now. Rodney yelled. Rodney, it's not Mickey. It's the BBC. Your brother is on 50 grand. Realization hit Rodney like a bucket of cold water. He listened to the question. Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Ravel. Rodney shouted into the phone. I'm 100% sure, Del, it's Ravel. Del, back in the studio, looked at the camera with the confidence of a man who had just been handed the keys to the Bank of England. It's Ravel, Jonathan. My brother knows. He's got the brains in the family. Are you sure, Derek? Ross asked. You don't have to take his answer. No. Rodney's spot on. Ravel. The buzzer sounded a long, agonizing drone of failure. Derek, Ross said, his voice filled with genuine pity. That was the wrong answer. It was Segovia. Dill's face fell. The 100,000 pounds vanished into the ether. What? But Rodney said he's got to GCE's. Chapter 14, The Return of the Conqueror Not. The journey back to Peckham was long and silent. Dell walked through the door of the flat to find Rodney and Cassandra waiting, still dressed as a gladiator and a policewoman. What happened? Rodney asked, his voice small. What happened? Dell exploded. What happened is that you're a dipstick, Rodney. That's what happened. Everyone knows that Ravel makes shoes. It was a trick question, and you fell for it. Shoes? Rodney stammered. Ravel wrote Bolero. I don't care if he wrote the Bible. He makes shoes in the Peckham High Street. You lost us 50 grand. The argument raged until the phone rang again. It was the producer of Gold Rush. Hello. Yes, this is Derek Trotter. What? No, really. Dell turned to the room, his eyes wide. There's been a mistake. The producer says it was Ravel. Segovia was just the guitarist who performed it or something. They've checked the facts. I can have the 50,000 pounds and come back on the show next week. The room erupted. Rodney cheered. Raquel cried. Even Cassandra hugged her prisoner. See, Dell shouted, his voice reaching a crescendo of triumph. I knew I was right. I knew the Trotters were back. He grabbed the phone again. Yeah. Well, I tell you what we're going to do. Give all the money to charity. Yeah. And if you phone here once again, I'm going to come down there and kick your arse into shredded duck. He slammed the phone down. Dell, Rodney screamed. What did you do that for? Because, Dell said, a sly grin spreading across his face, that wasn't the producer. I could hear the jukebox at the Nag's Head. That was Mickey Pierce again. He sat down, exhausted but undefeated. Don't worry, Rodney. This time next year, we'll be millionaires. And in the heart of Peckham, for the 1,000th time, they almost believed him. Chapter 15, The Morning After the Morning After. The following morning, Nelson Mandela House felt like the setting of a hungover Greek tragedy. The adrenaline of the gold rush debacle had dissipated, leaving only the cold reality of the Inland Revenue's interest rates and the lingering smell of Raquel's burnt toast. Dell sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea that was mostly condensed milk and desperation. He was staring at a pile of bills as if he could intimidate them into paying themselves. Rodney, Dell barked as his brother shuffled into the kitchen, looking like a man who had spent the night sleeping in a tumble dryer. Where is the inventory for the new stock? Rodney groaned, rubbing his eyes. Del, it's 8 in the morning, and technically, since I'm the managing director, shouldn't I be asking you for that? Del let out a short, sharp laugh. Managing director. Rodney, you're the only managing director in London who still gets an allowance from his older brother. Now, where is it? It's in the van. Rodney sighed. But it's mostly those unbreakable umbrellas we bought from Boyke. I tried one this morning. It snapped the second a light breeze hit it. Del didn't look up. That's because you don't know the technique. Rodney, you have to open them with finesse. They're not umbrellas. They're aerodynamic sunshades. It's all in the marketing. Raquel entered, Damien trailing behind her. The boy was wearing a t-shirt that said Future Millionaire, a gift from Del that currently felt like a cruel joke. Del, we've had another letter from the council, Raquel said, her voice weary. They're asking about the arrears again. Del stood up, smoothing his waistcoat. Don't you worry about the council. Sweetheart, I've got a meeting this afternoon with a very influential business associate. Top-level stuff. Is it Trigger? Rodney asked, deadpan. Del paused, his hand on the door handle. He might be in the vicinity. Yes, but that's irrelevant. We are the Trotters. We've been down before, but we always bounce back. Like those rubber balls that never stop. They're called super balls. Del, Rodney corrected. And eventually, they hit someone in the eye and get confiscated. Chapter 16, The Nag's Head Resurrection. The Nag's Head was the spiritual home of the Trotter Empire, a place where legends were told and where beer was served at a temperature that could only be described as room adjacent. As Del and Rodney walked in, a hush fell over the bar. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for a funeral or a surprise inspection by the health department. Trigger was at his usual spot, looking as if he hadn't moved since the mid-70s. Denzel was nursing a half-pint, and Sid was behind the bar, polishing a glass that looked like it had been used to store gravel. All right, Dave, Trigger said, nodding at Rodney. It's Rodney, Trig. Rodney sighed, for the 10,000th time. Heard about the show, Del, Sid said, leaning over the bar. Me and the wife were watching. She said she liked your suit, said it made you look like a very successful magician. Del ignored the barb. It's all part of the game. Sid, high stakes, high rewards. We were testing the waters, weren't we? Rodney, I was testing the limits of human embarrassment, Rodney muttered. Don't listen to him, Del said, ordering a large cognac. He's got